does take about 10 seconds to go through to LinkedIn. So we're just going to chill for a second. All right. Welcome back to another live. I'm your host, Joseph Lewin. And today I'm excited to welcome back. I was looking back. We actually did chat not that long ago. My friend, Jim Gilkey, he's been running a podcast also for a long time. And so just wanted to have him on to talk about really two things. One, how does podcasting work to drive revenue? Like, does it make sense? Can you actually drive revenue through a show? And then also, does it make sense to start a show? Like, the market's super saturated. It seems like everybody's starting a podcast. All the celebrities are starting podcasts these days. And so, does it make sense to start a podcast? And Jim has been running a podcast for quite a long time. And he's been running his show through multiple jobs. And so I also want to dig into the difference between driving the personal benefit of running a podcast and what that does for you on a personal level, personal branding, and also then what that's done from a business perspective. So first of all, Jim, welcome. Super excited to have you. And what I'd love for you to do is just kind of outline what was the onus for you actually kicking off your show.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Joseph. And it's always great to chat. I think there were two phases of this. So to your point, I was a little hesitant jumping in because I know this area has been saturated for a while, but I don't think there's a huge difference between where it was a few years ago and where it is now, as far as your ability to start a show and start to connect with the right individuals. And I think a lot of it, we talk about this a lot, Joseph, comes back to what is your why? What are you doing with this? So there have been kind of two iterations of this. One was I wanted to start something, but I was too scared to. And this was back in like 2017, 2018. I was working a job where I was selling a service that was more HR focused, leadership, culture development. And instead of actually doing a live recording, I would meet with presidents and CEOs of companies in Indianapolis, and I would interview their leader about what they did to build a great company culture. And then I would just write up a summary of that conversation and post it on LinkedIn. A big piece for me has always been having the human element as a part of this show. So back then it was called Caffeinated Culture, and I would bring them their favorite caffeinated beverage. And I saw the relationships that were built through that, the amount that I learned through that. And when I went through this journey, I think I described on the last time we chatted, of being a director of marketing tasked with launching ABM for a company, to then going to an ABM platform and having conversations with individuals that were in the exact same place that I was, that had the exact same questions that I had, knowing that I needed some way of quickly and easily teaching them the things that I, stumbled through and took a lot longer than I should have to figure out, and getting them those answers. It was really easy for me to revisit that caffeinated culture concept and then come up with the idea for account-based beverages, which is essentially share your one piece of ABM advice, something that people could do today because marketers are very busy and they don't have the time for a 3-hour Joe Rogan podcast. And also, what is the human element? It's what's your favorite drink. And so that was where this all started and came from. It was originally just going to be a LinkedIn show. And when I realized that I could very easily export the audio and send it to all of the different podcast platforms, it very quickly grew into being a podcast as well.
Yeah, so I'm just going to recap a little bit of what you were saying and reset, because for some reason didn't connect to LinkedIn. I had to reconnect my LinkedIn. So we lost about the first 3 minutes on LinkedIn. So if you're joining us on LinkedIn, welcome. And we were just digging into podcasting. Is it oversaturated? Does it make sense? Can you make money? That's kind of what we're talking about today. And then talking about the personal brand element of it, and then getting into the business development side of podcasting and the value it can bring for driving revenue and opportunities. And so, Jim, you started out creating content first with ultimately with people that you want to know, people you want to build relationships with, and then started doing video recordings and then kind of turn that into a podcast. And it's kind of interesting because my journey getting into podcasting was really similar, where I started out as a product marketing manager. I was writing a ton of blog content on very technical topics. I go do a ton of research, and then I realized, oh my gosh, I could just like interview the subject matter experts. So we do that and then write. And then it turned into, well, why don't I just record my conversations with them? Then we had video and content. And then it was like, okay, why don't we just put this on podcasting platform, and be off. But one thing I really love about your show that I haven't really seen too many other people in this arena do is you've made them ultra short. And so I love the idea of that personal human element that you talked about and bringing that in. But even while bringing in that personal element, which takes probably at least a minute or two, sometimes three, your episodes are really short. They're like 5 to 7 minutes usually. So how did you come up with the idea of just keeping it super short and succinct like that?
Yeah, there are a couple of pieces. So if you're a marketer, you can just look at the number of tabs that you have open at the current moment and get an understanding of just how busy this life can be in the world of marketing. That was a big driver of this. I don't want to create something just to hear myself talk. I don't like to hear myself talk. I want this to actually be useful and helpful for the people that are listening. And being able to have something that somebody could listen to an entire episode over the course of running to, make a cup of coffee or, on a drive, to go somewhere was kind of the goal of what I was shooting for. But the other piece of this was, I originally wanted to think about this for LinkedIn primarily. So a LinkedIn video of a certain length, one for my bandwidth to be able to upload from my computer, but also for people to want to stay engaged and take a look at. And so, the metrics are awesome looking through, how much of the video people are watching because they know the consistency of there's a quick introduction, a really tangible piece of advice, and then the human connection. And then we cut from there. So as you mentioned, or we've had some shows that are 2.5 minutes. We've had some shows that are 17, but the vast majority of them hover right around that 6-minute mark. And that seems to be the most palatable for the audience and what they're able to take.
Yeah, I like that because also, I mean, when you were running this, you were kicking this off, in a sales role where you're freaking busy, and then you're doing this as a side project to help you, ultimately close deals and build relationships for your job. And so also, if you have a 45-minute episode that you're going to edit in the evening, that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
I've done it. That's a ton of work to be editing your show that way. And so, yeah, keeping it short not only can be much more engaging for people listening, but it's also just a lot easier to maintain the consistency, which is a huge challenge. And that kind of brings us to, okay, is podcasting oversaturated? Is it overdone? And it's kind of interesting because I don't really want to go super far into the metrics. I don't know them off the top of my head, but I've heard the metrics on how many podcasts that exist versus how many podcasts are active. So tons of people start podcasts, but very few people actually get past episode 3, and then a very, very small percentage of people get past episode 20, and then the people who get to episode 100 are like very, very, very small percentage of people. And so just because everybody's starting a podcast and just because you see them publish an episode every once in a while doesn't mean that they're actually publishing it consistently. And then the other piece is depending on what area you're in. So we're both like kind of in the marketing, sales, maybe throw some entrepreneurship or leadership stuff in there here and there. So that is fairly, that's going to be much more saturated. There are a ton of people. But I just helped launch a podcast in the distribution space. There's like 4 podcasts in that space altogether for B2B distribution and e-commerce. And so starting a podcast there, they stand out like crazy because nobody's doing it. And same with my brother started a show in drone detection and mitigation. And he's now getting asked to speak at conferences after 2 years of launching the show because and he's interviewed like all the top leading experts in that space, because even though there's podcasts about marketing and sales, there's not any or very many other podcasts about drones, drone detection, that kind of stuff. So I'm curious for your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think there's a few important pieces that you touched on, as far as the saturation and ability to get started, get into it, there are, of course, a ton of podcasts out there. Having a clear understanding of why you want to do this is really important in breaking through that, and I call it head trash, but it's essentially a story that you're telling yourself and using that as reason to not start a show. And so if you are jumping in to try to be famous, you want to be the next Joe Rogan, yeah, I would say it's probably not going to work out because it takes a number of years and a lot of dollars behind the promotion for you to get to that point. But if you have the goal of wanting to meet cool and interesting people and learn some facts, there is um, a lot like earlier metrics of success that you will be able to hit those benchmarks, and that's going to be motivation for continuing past, that episode 3 or that episode 20, like you said. And so the learning curve on this is going to be really really high at the very beginning. As you mentioned, one of the reasons that I have my show as a 6-minute average episode is because I have 5 kids and I can't edit the episode until after they went to bed. And so in starting this and taking quite a long time, more the time than I want to admit for a 6-minute episode in editing, you need to understand that if you don't have a partner in being able to produce your show for you, there is going to be a pretty steep learning curve. And keeping in mind, the length of your show is going to directly impact how much time you're spending in trying to figure out how to do the editing and distribution side. The other piece too on saturation is there are many, many ways that you can stand out with your podcast, even if you're in a really saturated industry like marketing. Now, anyone outside of entrepreneurial or marketing or sales, that is, I think, a no-brainer. Start a podcast because you will be one of the few and you will stand out. But even in my show and my story of starting this account-based beverages podcast, which now I have Scrappy ABM producing for me, so it's a lot less work. But it was a good 9 months of me doing this before I had any invites for me to be a guest on a podcast. And it was coming up on a year before I had invites to go and speak at conferences. Now, I say this, a little tongue in cheek because if you listen to any of my episodes, just ask what is your piece of advice and what is your favorite drink. And because I am seen with these experts in the industry, now I look smart and people want to hear what I have to share. Now, the greatest part about this, my goal of this was to learn from really smart people and to be able to share that advice with others. So yes, over the course of 9 months or a year of putting out a weekly episode, I actually do have something to share now. It doesn't have to be mine, but I don't have any pride in this of needing to claim the ownership of this idea. I can always credit the other people that have been on my show and point more people in their direction, which again solidifies that relationship. But in the end, I think most people care about learning and impacting their day to day. And it doesn't really matter where the information comes from. So whether you're the person that came up with the idea and did all the research on it, or you're the person that shares it in a new and interesting way, I think the value of the content far surpasses who got to the idea first a lot of the time.
Yeah, and you brought up something that I've learned on accident, and then now I just see it happen every time we launch a show, which is if you do this for 6 months or a year, you're going to get credibility by association. And so most people think, well, you gain authority by talking about really smart stuff. That's not really how it works. You gain credibility by people who have credibility and authority being around you and talking with you, talking about your ideas together, and you being associated with them. You get so much more credibility so much faster that way. And to your point, like you brought up Joe Rogan, for better or for worse, that's not what this is here. It's not here what we're here to talk about, but people do associate a certain amount of credibility to Joe Rogan on a lot of different topics because he talks to all kinds of people who know way more than he does about it, and people start thinking that he knows something about that topic. And then you just said you talk to a bunch of super smart people, and then people start thinking you're a super smart person because you're hanging out with super smart people. And so if you want to be seen that way, you want to develop thought leadership, and then you're going, well, how do I actually do that? To me, it doesn't start with sharing really smart ideas. Unless you have like 0.1% ideas, your ideas aren't going to stand on their own. And I think that's a huge myth that people think, oh, if I just talk more online, then all of a sudden people are going to take me more seriously. But it's actually the credibility factor that gives your ideas any weight. So
Yeah, I think there's a really great story I heard back when I was in college, and I won't go through the whole story, the whole drawn out thing. I'll give you the shortened TLDR version. There's somebody that wanted to write the greatest piece of music ever, and they got a cabin out in the woods, went away from everyone so they could focus and write this piece of music. And it took them years and years to put this piece together. And by the time they came out to actually release the song, it fell flat because they were so out of touch of new ideas and what
mhm.
people cared about and making connections with individuals that the project of what they were working on fell short. Now, with a podcast, this is the exact opposite. We are not stuck in our day to day. We're not working in a vacuum, in office, in our house, working from home where we never leave our house, except for a couple times a week to go get groceries. This is something we are constantly being exposed to new ideas and new individuals, new perspectives
Absolutely.
and ways of thinking. So even in the way that that transforms how you show up every day at work, I would say it's worth it to start a podcast in and of that, even if you don't get anything else out of it.
Yeah, I mean, you just learn so much. That's what I love, man. I've done. I was just looking back. I think we've done like 75 episodes in the last year, and I've just met some super awesome people. And just to talk then about, I'm going to kind of bridge into, well, what are some of the benefits of doing this on a personal level? You mentioned a couple. One is you're going to gain authority. Another one is you're gonna build relationships with awesome people. And so I interviewed a few people multiple times, but there's probably between 65 and 75 people that I got to talk to for the first time
Yeah.
and meet them. And then some of those people have turned into clients. Some of them, I've bought services from them. Some of them have partnered with me on things. Some of them have invited me to speak at events. And then I've also, through the process, landed 2 jobs, both of them significantly better than the job that I had before, like huge pay increases, huge opportunity lifts. Just the trajectory of my career has completely changed because of people that I met through my podcast, and then ending up landing super awesome jobs from that. So on a personal level, that's what I've experienced. And then on a business level, if you talk to enough of the right people, you're going to close business on accident. Like it, and I think, and I'd love for you to talk to this a little bit too. One challenge that I see people who want to see business come from this, or they want to see, let's not even say business, like let's just say opportunity, just to level the playing field. Like maybe you're a marketer, you're not in sales at all, and you're going, okay, well, what is starting a podcast going to do for me? I don't really care about driving revenue. We'll just say opportunity to speak, opportunity to land a new job, opportunity to potentially land clients, whatever that is that you want to get out of it. It's really ultimately is still a numbers game, right? Because out of 100 people, maybe there's 10, 15, 20 people, 25 people on the high end that would actually have an opportunity that makes sense for you at all. So
Right.
if you talk to 25 people a year, then you're going to get the opportunity for a handful, 2 to 5 opportunities, something like that. Whereas if you're talking to 100 people in a year, now you're talking about 10, 15, 20, 25 opportunities that are coming your way. And so I think a huge mistake that people make is taking it really slow and then going, oh, why am I not seeing any results from this? Why is nothing happening after 3 months? And it's like, well, because you're having a show once a month and you've talked to 3 people. Like, of course you haven't seen anything come from it.
Yeah, you can definitely make a quick calculator in an Excel sheet and just look at the numbers. Essentially, everything across the board, rolling the dice. Every piece of content that you put out, every person that you have a conversation with, you can't go into it assuming that it's going to be the right time for them or it's going to be the right fit for them. And the more that you do, the greater your likelihood or the odds are that you have something that goes viral. You have somebody that you can work with. And like you said, the opportunities in and of themselves are not necessarily deals. Now, I'll be very clear. I've driven $14 million in revenue over the past few years since starting account-based beverages. Not all of it, of course, is from the show in and of itself, but that is definitely a huge piece of this, both in the opportunities that have been directly, sourced from the guests that I've had, the referrals that my guests have made to others that I've been able to talk to, but even just the credibility or some of the ideas that I share that in a sales conversation, in the context of that, they're like, I want to work with this person because they seem really bright. Even though, as I mentioned, the ideas aren't my own, they're just what I've learned on this show. But the other piece that I think is really important that we don't talk about enough is just some of the other benefits that come from having a podcast and what that says about you. So there was a report years ago that talked about different singers and different artists and how they were able to book certain venues. And when a venue had to make a decision between artist A and artist B, they would typically go to their social following and look at who had the larger social following. And that would be the person that would win out and get to book that venue. It is kind of the same thing in business. So I was working at Terminus in a time where they had multiple rounds of layoffs. And because I was the one that had the podcast going, I was the one that survived every single one of those. Again, it might not have been the only reason, but if you have somebody that has a voice and is connecting with your audience, both from a prospect or a customer side because of the podcast, that is job security a lot of the time. And it's something that I didn't have Terminus paying for the show for me. I was paying out of pocket for sending drinks to people or for the software that I was using for recording. And I was obviously paying with the time in doing these recordings or doing the editing for this. But you can see, what that was able to provide me both in job security. And then when I needed a new job, Mason, who I work for now, was episode number 11 on account-based beverages. So in the same thread that you said, Joseph, this is something that has not only had clients generate from the guests that I've had on, but also my future employer, future partners, and future friends.
I love it, man. Yeah. So to kind of round out here, I mean, we talked about personal and business benefit. So I'm going to just call out because I mean, I've been on LinkedIn and posting and very active since 2017, 2018. And I've posted hundreds of times. Some of those have done pretty well. I have a few that have gone like minor viral, not crazy viral, but I've gotten a lot of attention on different posts. And the amount of revenue that I can attribute, or the amount of opportunity I can attribute directly to any of my content, is very low. Like I've gotten some here and there, and it'll trickle in. I've gotten some inbound. I'm not, and there's value to that. And then also, it's the brand side of things. It makes it easier to get people onto my podcast. It makes it easier to start conversations with people through all that. But the podcast, I've driven a ton of personal revenue. I've landed clients, landed jobs that are 100% directly from the show, and that would not have happened any other way. And so if you're listening to this and you're going, man, I'm busy posting multiple times a week, I don't have time to do a podcast, I'm going to call it out and say, you're probably, unless you are getting like thousands of likes or, at least hundreds on every single post you put out, and you're getting hundreds of thousands of impressions a week, the amount of effort that you put into creating content that you're posting out there is probably not doing as much for you as you think it is. And I've trained people how to do that stuff.
And how often does the person that you interview on a podcast make a post about you? You compare that to other posts that you put out there. Very few of my posts that are written content have other people created a post just to call out my written content. But every single time I have a podcast episode that has somebody as a guest, they're also creating a post and creating promotion about this content. So it's another great added value to this.
Yeah, man, I love that. And so if you're listening to this and you're going, man, should I do that? Yes, you should start a podcast in 2025. Man, every person that I see that does it and gets at least 10 to 15 episodes in, they see value. And I mean, the thing that I always hear from people after starting a show is like, man, this is way more fun than I thought it would be. It's way easier than I thought it would be. And I wish I would have started it sooner. And so don't be the person who says, I wish I would have started sooner. Just start sooner. So if you're on the personal side, or you're looking to start this for your business, or you work at a company and you're going, hey, I could really see the value of being able to have somebody from our sales team get conversations with exactly the people we're trying to sell to, or our CEO would really benefit from being able to build personal brand thought leadership by associating with other industry leaders. Hey, that's stuff that we help with. So reach out to me or Jim about podcasting and go, hey, tell me more about podcasting. How do I do it? How do I get started? Because I'd love to chat with you about that. And yeah, we help people launch at Scrappy ABM. We help people launch podcasts all the time. And over the last year, I've helped launch about 30 shows. By this time next week, it'll be 30 shows that I'll have helped launch in the last year. So definitely reach out. Jim, any last words on podcasting?
Yeah, just to echo your sentiment of reaching out to us. I mean, worst case scenario, we just hype you up and make you feel really good and feel really smart. Best case scenario, you have the tools and confidence for moving forward and starting your own show, because the benefits are endless.
Yeah, and it sounds like so cliche to say that the benefits are endless, but it's like, it really is. Like the crazy thing is that the more that I do this, the more I'm like, okay, treat this as a business development activity, not a sales activity. You're not trying to pitch people. And I know that's kind of a fine line there, but business development is more about building relationships, bringing people together, networking, connecting, and then adding a ton of value by serving people with what you actually do for work and bringing them in that way. And so if you treat it as a business development activity primarily, you get an insane amount of marketing benefit from it at the same time. And so absolutely love that take on it. So Jim, thank you so much for jumping in. If you are looking to learn more about account-based marketing, check out Account-Based Beverages, Jim's show. Super fun. And I've had a lot of fun working with Jim on that show. So Jim, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. We'll see you all next time.